This episode of Superman and Lois Season 3, Episode 2, titled Uncontrollable Forces, was a very emotional one, as it touches on a very touchy and a very serious topic with Lois's big reveal in regards to what's actually going on with her, and we do kind of get like hints that something was really bothering her all the way throughout the episode. But everything from the acting between Tyler Hoechlin and Betsy Tilloch to just the pacing in regards to how each storyline builds up, everything was handled so well, and Superman and Lois just really sets that bar high in terms of just quality DCTV shows. This show is just so good, and this was by far one of the most emotional episodes I have ever seen in a DCTV show, but also once again delivers another incredible episode of the show, and I am very interested to see what is next. We do have more of the storyline with Bruno Mannheim developing. We do kind of get our first confrontation between Superman and Bruno Mannheim, and we get to see like how he believes like he's the hero of this area and various other things like that. We do even get to see Onomatopoeia being more menacing as she gets to highlight her incredible abilities, and just everything was just so incredibly well handled in this episode. But yeah, before I go more in detail with this review and breakdown itself, I will give a quick spoiler warning, as this is a review and breakdown after all, so I'll be going over some major spoilers which you certainly wouldn't want to hear from me. So for those who haven't seen the episode, go watch the episode and then come back later for this breakdown. But for those who are staying, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you are aware of more Superman and Lois content coming your way. Okay, so this episode picks up with some sort of like a montage with Lois Lane, and she's getting checked up on with John Henry Irons' sister pretty much, and she's just in like the hospital getting various different tests, and you do see something is really bothering her, and the facial expressions Betsy Tilloch was giving, like, it's just very well acted. The music and like the acting, it really just sets the tone, and it does foreshadow something emotional happening, like this big emotional reveal that is going to come. And like in these various different like montages, for example, when Clark and Lois are in bed, for example, Clark's asleep, Lois is awake, and even like when the family in general, when they're out having lunch together, you do really see like Lois is just not paying attention, as she's just very concerned that this reveal that we're going to talk about is just in her mind the entire time. Now, we do have Clark noticing a lot of the times in this episode that there is something up with Lois. He's just waiting for the right moment for Lois to reveal it, in which Clark does obviously ask in this episode if this has something to do with them not being able to like get the baby, because Lois was very hopeful about that in the previous episode, and then it turns out that Lois is not actually pregnant, and then Clark pretty much discusses the possibility of having another baby, but Lois doesn't really want to move forward with that. Like, she said something along the lines of like it was a dream at that time, but like she doesn't really want that anymore. But then we definitely have like the more uninteresting parts of this episode, and that is with this whole party thing. We have Natalie and Sarah wanting to go to a party. Obviously, I would just get this right out of the way. Sarah's essentially being like a wing girl to Natalie, trying to get her into a relationship. They find this party in Metropolis that is from Natalie's old school in Metropolis, something along those lines, pretty much where she left off in season 2. But yeah, she's being wing girled, and at the same time as well, Jordan and Jonathan don't really have anything to do as well, so they make a plan to go to the party as well. So it's pretty much a coincidence that they're together. Obviously, Natalie was about to mention it in the cafe, but Sarah is the one that doesn't really necessarily want them to tag along, but obviously ends up being a coincidence. They do have to end up having fun together. Now, obviously, Natalie does tell John Henry where they're going, but Sarah doesn't really. She just says that we're going over to Natalie's for a movie marathon, and that does also set up John Henry and Lana's storyline as well. But just quickly getting the storyline out of the way, essentially they're at the party. Natalie meets a guy who she pretty much ends up talking to. Jordan and Sarah end up getting into some trouble, whereas Jonathan meets up with his ex, and problems start to arise in terms of that. But then eventually a fight breaks out, and Jordan does get revenge by pretty much freezing the party guy's car. And I am pretty sure that this was some sort of an Easter egg or something along the lines of to Man of Steel, where Clark does obviously somewhat destroy the guy's truck. I do feel like there is some sort of like an Easter egg towards that, but not necessarily, as you know, the truck wasn't really frozen, whereas the car was frozen. But you know, it's damage to a property, so I'm gonna take that as an Easter egg, although it might not be, it might just be coincidence. Who knows? But while that is happening, the former mayor George calls Lana for help as he's getting attacked by Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia does use her powers against the mayor, and as I said, once again, this does set up Lana's storyline. But she does hear everything, and the mayor, or something like the ex-mayor, shall we say, does give slight hints to Lana in regards to what she is supposed to be looking for. But meanwhile, Clark and Lois head to Metropolis to interview the judge that let Henry Miller out. Henry Miller was obviously the villain from last episode. Now, the interview does not go as planned, as the judge immediately asks for both Clark and Lois to just leave. But, you know, they're still determined, they're still going to follow through with it, in which Clark and Lois end up finding the criminal, shall we say, that escorted both Clark and Lois out to the area, in which Clark obviously suits up as Superman and follows the criminals. Meanwhile, Lois is going to, you know, try her luck and go for another interview, which does set something else up. Now, we then have obviously Superman following after these criminals, in which he uses his super hearings to find the location of these criminals, and we come across Bruno Mannheim, who's obviously the main villain for, I believe, the first half. It could even be the entire season. But we have Superman essentially interrogating Mannheim. You know, they do talk about the villain from last episode, that being Henry Miller, and then we have Bruno Mannheim saying things like, where's your evidence, you're just falsely accusing, various things like that. And he claims to be the hero of Hobbs Bay, which is like the area where Mannheim is from, and he does mention that Superman is pretty much useless, like he doesn't really do any good, he does more harm and various things like that. But yeah, there is no real way for Bruno Mannheim to be caught over here, as Superman doesn't really present any evidence, more so just accusations, which we know to be true, but obviously they can't really prove it. Now, while that's happening, obviously we do have the judge that's attempting to commit something, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say on YouTube, but for those who watch the episode, you know what it is. I don't really think I can mention that word, so I can't really say it, but she's trying to do something in which Lois begs for the judge to essentially get down from the ledge. She does start pep talking in just such a very, very personal and just very, very powerful way, and you do find like the emotions starting to kick in, like you are getting ready for that big reveal which she's going to give, and how Lois directly relates to whatever's happening with the judge over here. So they are really setting this reveal up really, really well. But then the interrogation with Bruno Mannheim is disturbed when obviously Clark uses his super hearing to find out that something's going on with the judge and Lois's area. So we have Superman heading over there, like he's flying up, and this is when Lois breaks the reveal that she has stage 3 inflammatory breast cancer. I believe it was something along those lines. And this scene, it was just very, very incredibly powerful, but also very emotional, especially when you head over to like the shot with Clark in it, where he obviously hears the reveal. Like you do see, like he's shocked, but also he is Superman at this moment. He isn't Clark Kent, so you have to have him kind of hold all of these emotions within him, and it was just handled incredibly well. Like you see Superman literally trying to contain himself as much as possible, but also it's very, very hard. Eventually when the judge leaves and when the judge is saved, when Clark goes down, just hugs Lois, it was just incredibly emotional. You do see Clark obviously then just bursting into tears, and it was just such an emotional scene. Now, in this episode, we did also have a very unusual duo, but it was a very cool story then. That was with Lana Lang and John Henry, where obviously Lana goes to see Sarah, in which John Henry reveals that she went all the way to Metropolis. They didn't really go for a movie night or anything like that. So Lana clocks that obviously it's a lie. But this is when we come across John Henry and Lana essentially having dinner at his, and then Lana does pretty much mention the death of the ex-mayor and how something along the lines of Pride of Smallville has been said from the mayor, in which John Henry and Lana, they're trying to piece out and just figure out what's happening, in which Lana finds out that this had something to do with like the big massive logo in like the mayor's office or something along those lines, in which we had John Henry and Lana going into an investigation. They find the USB device at the mayor's office, but then they get attacked by Onomatopoeia, and once again we get this incredible scene where Onomatopoeia highlights her abilities, how powerful she is, and it was just really, really cool. But yeah, the episode ends with Lois and Clark discussing about, what Clark has heard in the rooftop, in which Lois does fully tell Clark like what's been happening and how she actually does have stage 3 inflammatory breast cancer, and it's like a very rare and aggressive form of cancer. And Clark does essentially say we're going to get through this as a family when the boys come along, and how Lois is going to fight through this, basically like they're going to fight through it together. But then the episode fully wraps up with Bruno Mannheim and Onomatopoeia pretty much in this basement that they were in from last episode, where they're further testing on Henry Miller, in which Onomatopoeia tells Bruno Mannheim to stop, in which she does mention that John Henry is still alive, in which Bruno Mannheim's like, didn't you kill him? So obviously in regards to this, it's got to do with like the original John Henry Irons and like the multiverse John Henry Irons, and how the original one's dead, but they think that John Henry is the original John Henry. It's not like a multiversal thing or anything. That's what they think, whereas us as the audience, we obviously know that John Henry Irons is still around. So I'm interested to see like where this original John Henry storyline is going to go. Like, is Bruno Mannheim afraid like something's going to happen to him in terms of like getting exposed? Because obviously the original John Henry was up to some very like suspicious activities, and he did have links to both Lex Luthor and Bruno Mannheim. So obviously they're going to go for like an assassination plot or something like that. Something along those lines, because they found out that John Henry is still alive. So I'm just very interested to see how all of this links together with the original John Henry, Onomatopoeia, and just Intergang in general. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. Be sure to tell me in the comment section down below what you guys thought about this episode. I'm interested to see all of your thoughts towards all of this as well. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video.